The desert wind carried whispers of ancient spirits as Aiyana carefully placed another stone upon her family's lodge. Sweat glistened on her copper skin, her movements graceful despite the burden. Unknown to her, watchful eyes followed from the shadow of a distant mesa. Nantan, the tribe's fiercest warrior, observed in silence, his scarred hands gripping his spear. The elders spoke of his bravery in battle, but none knew the emptiness that haunted his nights. For 3 moons he had watched her work, drawn by something he couldn't name, something that stirred beneath his vow of solitude. Could a warrior who had known only bloodshed and isolation ever learn the language of the heart? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun had barely crested the eastern mesa when Aiyana emerged from her family's temporary shelter. At 24, she carried herself with the quiet dignity that had earned her respect among the Apache people of their small settlement. The turquoise pendant at her throat, her grandmother's final gift, caught the light as she gathered her tools for another day of building. "Aiyana, the juniper tea is ready," called her father Makia from inside. As the settlement's medicine man, he rose before dawn to prepare his remedies and offerings. "Thank you, father," she replied, accepting the warm clay cup from his weathered hands. "How is your cough today?" Makia waved away her concern. "Better. The spirits have been kind." His eyes, though clouded with age, still held the sharp wisdom that had guided their people through drought, disease, and the encroachment of the white settlers beyond the mountains. The flash floods 3 moons ago had swept away several lodges, including theirs. While some families chose to rebuild quickly with brush and hide, Aiyana had convinced her father that a stone lodge would withstand future floods. It meant more work, but she was determined. "Sister, sister!" Tallulah, her 12-year-old sister, came running, her hair still uncombed. "Kichi says there are rabbit tracks by the south stream." Behind her trailed their 16-year-old brother Kichi, already carrying his hunting bow. "Many tracks," he confirmed with the seriousness of a young man eager to prove himself among the warriors. "Fresh from last night. Then perhaps our evening meal will be rabbit stew." Aiyana smiled. "But first, Tallulah, let me braid your hair. You cannot run wild like the spring foals forever." As she worked the girl's long black hair into tight braids, Aiyana gazed toward the partially constructed lodge. She had chosen the location carefully close enough to water, elevated enough to stay dry during rains, and positioned to catch the morning sun while providing shade in the afternoon heat. Each stone was selected for its shape and strength, each placement deliberate. "Aiyana." The call came from Elder Hanavi, the oldest woman in their settlement. Bent with age but sharp of mind, she approached with slow, careful steps. "I have brought you something for your new lodge." In her gnarled hands she held a small pouch of crushed herbs. "Place this in the eastern corner when you set the stones today. It will bring protection from the thunder beings." "Thank you, Elder." Aiyana accepted the gift with appropriate reverence. The old ways were important, especially now when so many tribes were losing their traditions to the changing world. "Will you join us for the evening meal, Elder?" Makia asked, emerging from their shelter. "Kichi believes rabbit will be on our fire tonight." "If these old bones allow," Hanavi nodded. "I wish to see how your daughter's lodge progresses. Not many young women would choose stone over hide. She builds not just for this season, but for generations." Pride warmed Aiyana's heart at the elder's words. She finished Tallulah's braids and gathered her water pouch. "Aiyana," a new voice called. Tarek, son of their settlement's best hunter, approached with confident strides. At 28, he had already earned respect in council meetings for his thoughtful words and fair judgments. "My father and I are hunting near the Red Cliffs today." Would you like us to look for the white clay you use for your medicines? His interest in her was as obvious as the sun above, but Aiyana had always kept him at a respectful distance. That would be kind, Tarek. The last of my supply was used treating the children's fever. Then I will find it, he promised, his eyes lingering on her face a moment too long. After he departed, Hanabi chuckled softly. That young man builds his own lodge in his mind, with you tending its fire. Aiyana shifted uncomfortably. I have a lodge to complete before thinking of such things. The heart does not always wait for the right season, the elder observed, but it knows what it seeks, even when the mind is too busy with stones and clay. With her tools gathered and the blessing herbs secured, Aiyana headed toward her unfinished lodge, her thoughts already on the day's work, rather than Tarak's attentions or Anovi's cryptic words. Stone by stone, she would build their future, solid and enduring against whatever storms might come. As dawn broke over the mesas, Nantan was already awake. He had been since the night owl's final call. Sleep came rarely to him, and when it did, it brought dreams of blood and loss that left him more tired than restful. At 30 winters, his body bore the scars of a dozen battles, each one etched into his skin like a map of his solitary journey. His dwelling stood apart from the others, nestled against the western ridge where few ventured. Inside, he knelt before a small fire, his obsidian knife laid carefully on a deerskin cloth. The blade had belonged to Kitsu, the war chief who had found him orphaned after Navajo raiders destroyed his family's camp. A warrior's spirit lives in his blade, Kitsu had told him. Keep it sharp, keep it close, and it will never betray you. Unlike people, Nantan thought grimly. He ran a smooth stone along the obsidian's edge, feeling its deadly sharpness with his thumb. The knife had tasted the blood of many enemies and saved his life countless times. When Kitsu fell in battle 5 winters ago, the knife passed to Nantan, along with an unspoken burden. Be stronger. Be faster. Trust no one but yourself. The settlement's current war chief, Halaku, had tried to draw Nantan closer to the people, recognizing his exceptional skills. But after losing everyone he had ever cared for, Nantan had made his vow of solitude. He would serve the tribe as its fiercest warrior, but his heart would remain untouchable, frozen like the high mountain lakes in winter. He rose, securing the knife at his hip, and stepped outside. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of juniper and sage. His keen eyes scanned the landscape, noting each detail, every shadow that seemed out of place. This vigilance had kept the Apache settlement safer than many others in these troubled times. Still watching for ghosts, brother? The voice belonged to Halaku, approaching from the main path. Ghosts don't leave tracks, Nantan replied, pointing to subtle disturbances in the soil. 3 deer passed here before dawn. And something else, Wolf, I think. Halaku nodded, long accustomed to Nantan's uncanny tracking abilities. The council meets at midday. The chief wishes you to report what you've seen on the northern borders. Nantan frowned. Why not send a runner? Because I wish to see if you still breathed, Halaku said bluntly. 3 days you've been gone, not a word to anyone. I needed no one. The tribe needs you, Halaku countered. And whether you admit it or not, you need the tribe. This solitude, it's not our way. Nantan turned away, checking his bow and quiver. I'll be at the council. Halaku lingered a moment longer. There will be a gathering afterward. Makya's daughter has completed half her stone lodge. There will be songs, food. I have no time for celebrations. You have nothing but time, Nantan, Halaku said quietly. And you're wasting it in shadows while life passes by. After Halaku departed, Nantan remained motionless, his jaw tight. He had first noticed Makya's eldest daughter weeks ago during a tribal gathering. Unlike the other young women who cast sidelong glances his way, She had seemed completely absorbed in discussing healing plants with the elders. There was something in her focused determination that had caught his attention and held it since then. He had found himself watching her from a distance as she worked on her stone lodge. Her hands moved with purpose, her face serene even when lifting heavy stones. Sometimes she sang softly, ancient songs that carried on the wind to where he stood hidden among the juniper trees. It meant nothing, he told himself. Merely curiosity about her unusual choice to build with stone rather than traditional materials. Yet he could not explain why he had begun timing his returns to the settlement to coincide with her work on the lodge. Gathering his weapons, Nantan headed toward the settlement for the council meeting, taking the long path that would, by mere coincidence of course, pass within view of where Aiyana would be placing her stones today. The council meeting ended with unsettling news. Two young hunters had discovered unfamiliar tracks in the northern Spring Navajo raiders, most likely scouting the territory. Chief Ahote had ordered increased patrols and instructed women and children to remain close to the settlement. Nantan, the chief called as the council dispersed, follow these tracks. Learn their numbers, their intentions. Nantan nodded, already calculating the supplies he would need. This was what he did, best hunting those who threatened his people. Alone, silent, deadly. Take another warrior with you, Halaku suggested. I move faster alone, Nantan replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. As he left the council lodge, Nantan's eyes found Aiyana across the settlement, instructing her sister in grinding corn. The women would be vulnerable if raiders attacked. For reasons he did not wish to examine, his thoughts lingered on Aiyana's safety before he forced them back to the task at hand. By midday, Nantan was miles from the settlement, following the faint signs of passage that others would have missed entirely. The tracks told their story to his practiced eye. 6 warriors, traveling light, moving with purpose rather than hunting. Scouts for a larger party, most likely. He paused at a stream crossing, kneeling to examine a partial footprint. Something wasn't right. These men were taking a circular route and heading back toward the settlement from the east. A diversion tactic. The realization hit him like a blow. They weren't merely scouting. They were encircling. And if they approached from the east, they would come near the water pools, where the women gathered at sunset. Where Aiyana would be. Nantan abandoned stealth for speed, racing through the juniper forest, his moccasins barely disturbing the earth. He had nearly reached the eastern pools when he heard a woman's startled cry. Cut short, he crested a small rise to see Aiyana backing away from 2 Navajo warriors. Behind her lay the pieces of a shattered clay pot, water soaking into the thirsty ground. One raider held a stone war club, the other a knife. They advanced on her with predatory grins. The Apache healer's daughter will fetch a good price, one said in broken Apache. Or perhaps we keep her. Aiyana's face showed fear, but her stance was defiant. She clutched a small knife, a healer's tool, not a weapon. My father will curse your spirits for 10 generations if you touch me, she warned, her voice steadier. Then her hands, the raiders laughed. Dead men cast no curses. Nantan's arrow took the first raider in the throat before the man could blink. As the second turned in shock, Nantan was already charging forward, obsidian knife drawn. The raider raised his club, but Nantan was faster, decades of training guiding his strike to the soft spot beneath the ribs. The man collapsed with a gurgling cry. Silence fell, broken only by Aiyana's rapid breathing and the rustle of juniper leaves in the breeze. Nantan wiped his blade on the dead raider's clothing, his movements methodical, betraying none of the thundering pulse in his veins. He had killed many men, but never had the act left him feeling so unsettled. He glanced at Aiyana, expecting to see revulsion or fear. Instead, her eyes held something more complex relief, mingled with a healer's instinctive sorrow at death. There are more, he said simply. 6 at least. We must return to the settlement. She nodded, still clutching her small knife. My pot? Leave it. But my father needs the water for his medicines. Nantan clenched his jaw. This was why he worked. Alone. Others always complicated matters with their concerns, their needs. We'll collect water closer to the settlement, he conceded. These two were scouts. There will be others searching when they don't return. As they moved quickly through the forest, Nantan noticed a thin line of blood on Aiyana's arm, a cut from one of the pottery shards. You're injured. She glanced at the wound as if noticing it for the first time. It's nothing. Nothing to her. Perhaps, but Nantan found his eyes drawn to it repeatedly as they traveled. Blood on her skin because he had failed to track the raiders quickly enough. The thought bothered him more than it should have. 3 days after the attack, life in the settlement had changed. Warriors patrolled the perimeter constantly. Women gathered water and firewood in groups, always with armed escorts. Children were kept close to the central lodges, their usual play curtailed. Yet Aiyana had insisted on continuing work on her lodge, though now a young warrior named Kwahu sat nearby, spear in hand, keeping watch. You should wait until the danger has passed, Tarak told her as he helped lift a heavy cornerstone into place. And when will that be? She asked, wiping sweat from her brow. My father needs a proper place to store his medicines. The rains will come again. Tarak frowned but said no more. Since the attack, he had been especially attentive, bringing her family meat from his hunts, offering help with the lodge. His intentions were clear to everyone not, as Aiyana arranged her medicine bundle on a flat stone, sorting healing herbs and tying them in small packets. Her thoughts drifted to Nantan. After bringing her safely back to the settlement, he had spoken briefly to the chief and then disappeared on another scouting mission. His rescue had been swift, efficient, and then he was gone, as if helping her had been merely another duty. He is not like other men, Elder Hanavi said, settling beside Aiyana with a grunt. The old woman had an unsettling habit of addressing thoughts before they were spoken. Who? Aiyana asked, though she knew. Anovi's wrinkled face creased with a knowing smile. The lone wolf who saved our healer's daughter. He was tracking raiders. I was simply in their path. Perhaps the spirits placed you there for a reason. Hanavi selected a sprig of sage from Aiyana's bundle and crushed it between her fingers, inhaling the scent. Nantan was not always solitary, you know. Aiyana's hands stilled. What do you mean? As a boy, after Kitsu brought him to our people, he laughed. He had friends. He sang at gatherings. The elder's eyes grew distant with memory. Then came the great battle at Red Valley. 30 of our warriors faced nearly 60 Navajo. Nantan was barely 20 winters. His 3 closest friends died that day, and many others. Including Kitsu, Aiyana said softly. Everyone knew the story of the legendary war chief's final battle. Yes, Nantan was the one who carried Kitsu's broken body back to us. After that, something in him closed like a fist. He became the finest warrior our people have known in generations. But at what cost? Hanavi sighed. A man who lives only for battle will find his spirit withering even as his skills grow. Before Aiyana could respond, a commotion at the settlement's edge drew their attention. Nantan had returned, along with 2 other scouts. They headed directly to the chief's lodge, their expressions grim. That evening, as her family shared a simple meal around their fire, Chief Ahot called the tribe together. Nantan stood beside him, face impassive. Our scouts have found signs of a larger raiding party moving south from Navajo lands, the chief announced. At least 20 warriors, perhaps more. Murmurs of concern rippled through the gathering. We have sent runners to our sister bands asking for warriors, Ahot continued. Until they arrive, We must prepare. The women and children will move to the cave shelters in the eastern cliffs. Protests arose immediately. The caves were cramped, dark, and far from water. I need to continue my lodge, Aiyana said, rising. To her feet, the stone walls are already half-height. They would provide better protection than the caves. A half-built lodge is no defense against 20 warriors, Tarak argued. She's right. The unexpected support came from Nantan. All eyes turned to him in surprise. He rarely spoke at tribal gatherings. The stone walls are solid. With proper defenses added, the lodge and surrounding structures could be held. His dark eyes met Aiyana's briefly across the firelight. Something unspoken passed between them, acknowledgement, perhaps, or understanding. Very well, Chief Ahod decided. Those who wish may help strengthen the stone lodge and surrounding area. Nantan, you will oversee the defenses. As the gathering dispersed, Aiyana approached Nantan. Thank you for supporting my suggestion. His face remained unreadable. It was tactically sound. The caves would be a death trap if discovered. He turned to leave, then paused. Your arm, how is it? Aiyana touched the small bandage covering the cut from the broken pot. Healing well. He nodded once, then walked away, leaving Aiyana to wonder at the brief concern from a man said to care for nothing but battle. Dawn found Nantan already at Aiyana's lodge, examining the stone walls with critical eyes. He had spent a restless night, his dreams haunted by images of raiders breaching the settlement's defenses. Each time in these troubling visions he would arrive too late to prevent the attack on Aiyana's lodge. Such dreams were unwelcome reminders of emotions he had long suppressed. Attachments were weaknesses. Weaknesses got warriors killed. Will it hold? Aiyana's voice startled him. She stood a few paces away, her long hair freshly braided, a basket of dried corn balanced on her hip. The south wall needs reinforcement. He replied, professional and distant. The stones are too loosely placed. I was saving the best-fitting stones for the doorway, she explained, setting down her basket. But I can use them for the wall instead. Do both correctly or don't bother, he said sharply, then regretted his tone when he saw her stiffen. Unexpectedly, she didn't retreat or lash back. Instead, she regarded him with the assessing gaze of a healer studying an injury. Show me how. Then, she said simply. Throughout the morning, they worked side by side, Nantan demonstrating how to position the stones for maximum strength. Others from the tribe joined them, bringing additional materials, but Nantan remained focused on Aiyana's techniques, correcting her methods with fewer words than most would use. But with unexpected patience at midday, Chief Ahod approached, accompanied by the tribal elders. They inspected the improved defenses with approving nods. Well done, the chief said. Then, turning to Nantan, the hunting party reports fresh game to the south. We need meat to prepare for possible siege. I'll go, Nantan said immediately. Take others with you, Ahod instructed. Safety in numbers, until the danger passes. Nantan's jaw tightened, but he nodded. As the chief departed, he found Aiyana watching him. You prefer to hunt alone, she observed. Yes, yet you work well with others when needed. She gestured to the improved walls. You're a good teacher. The unexpected compliment caught him off guard. He muttered something non-committal and busied himself checking his bow. That afternoon, Nantan led 5 warriors on the hunting expedition. Among them was Tarak, whose resentful glances were poorly concealed. They tracked a herd of deer to a grassy valley and took down 3 large bucks, more meat than the settlement had seen in many weeks as they prepared to transport the game back. The sky darkened with approaching storm clouds. We should hurry, Tarak urged. The rain comes soon. Nantan nodded agreement, but as the others hoisted the first deer onto carrying poles, he slipped away into the brush. He returned minutes later with a small bundle of plants. Tarak eyed the plants suspiciously. What are those? Willow bark, juniper berries, sage. Nantan secured them carefully in his pouch. The healer's supplies were damaged in the attack. Understanding dawned on Tarak's face, followed by a flash of jealousy. Aiyana has enough herbs. Her father doesn't, Nantan replied evenly. The old man's cough worsens. They returned to the settlement just as the first heavy raindrops began to fall. By the time they reached the central fire pit, the storm had unleashed its full fury. Thunder cracked overhead as they distributed the meat. Nantan sought out Makia's shelter, where he found the old healer huddled near a small fire. His breathing labored. Aiyana knelt beside him, concern evident in her face. Your father needs dry wood for his fire, Nantan observed, noticing the dwindling pile. Most of our supply was soaked before we could cover it, Aiyana explained, looking up. Rainwater dripped from the shelter's hide covering. Without a word, Nantan left, returning shortly with an armload of dry wood from his own stores. As he arranged it near the fire, he casually placed the pouch of medicinal plants beside Aiyana. Her fingers brushed the pouch, opening it to reveal the contents. Her eyes widened in surprise, then softened with gratitude. How did you know which plants to gather? She asked softly. Nantan kept his focus on building up the fire. I pay attention. Later, as he left their shelter, Aiyana followed him into the rain. She pressed something into his palm, a small eagle feather, decorated with a simple beaded pattern. For protection, she said, and gratitude. Their eyes met briefly in the storm's fading light, and Nantan felt something shift inside. Him a small crack in the ice he had built around his heart. The rains passed, leaving the earth soft and the air sweet with the scent of wet sage. Aiyana's lodge now stood chest high, its walls sturdy enough that several families had begun sheltering within them during the nights, though the roof was not yet complete. Colorful blankets stretched across the top provided some protection from the elements. Inside, women gathered to grind corn and share stories while children played in the protected space. Aiyana had incorporated small niches into the eastern wall perfect for storing her father's medicines and the family's few treasures. In one such niche hung a dream catcher of willow and sinew, adorned with hawk feathers and small stones. She had crafted it during the rains, its intricate pattern taking shape as she listened to the women's stories of their dreams and hopes. You've built more than a lodge, Elder Hanavi observed, running her gnarled fingers along the smooth stones. You've built a gathering place. Aiyana smiled, pleased by the compliment. The stones remember the hands that placed them. They hold our stories. And which stories have you woven into this wall? Hanavi asked, her eyes twinkling with knowing mischief. Before Aiyana could answer, excited voices announced the return of the hunting party. The tribe had organized a major expedition to secure meat for smoking and drying preparation for potential difficult days ahead. Warriors and hunters had been gone for 3 days. Aiyana stepped outside, shading her eyes against the bright sunlight. The hunters returned triumphant, dragging travois laden with elk and deer. Among them walked Nantan, his face streaked with hunting paint, a powerful bow still gripped in his hand. That evening, a celebration unfolded around the central fires. The successful hunt meant security and abundance, reasons for gratitude, and joy even in uncertain times. Drums beat a steady rhythm as food was prepared and shared as twilight deepened. Several women, including Aiyana, performed the traditional blessing dance. Moving in graceful circles around the fire, their steps followed patterns passed down through countless generations. Aiyana's mind emptied of all concerns as she surrendered to the ancient rhythms, her body flowing through the familiar movements. Only once did her concentration break, when her gaze caught Nantan's across the flames. Unlike his usual stoic mask, His expression held an intensity that sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. Quickly, she looked away, refocusing on the dance. Later, as the celebration continued, Tarek approached her, offering a wooden cup of sweet berry juice. "Your lodge design has impressed everyone," he said. "My father says you think like both a woman and a warrior, seeing to comfort and defense at once." "Thank you," Aiyana replied, accepting the drink. "It's simply practical." "Practicality is an admirable quality in a wife," Tarek ventured, his intention clear. Before Aiyana could respond, a tense voice interrupted. "The chief requires your presence." Tarek. Nantan stood nearby, his face once again an unreadable mask. "Something about tomorrow's patrol routes." Tarek's jaw tightened, but he nodded stiffly and departed, casting one last meaningful glance at Aiyana. Not an awkward silence fell between her and Nantan. Did the chief really summon him? She finally asked. The ghost of a smile touched Nantan's lips. "Eventually, he will. I merely anticipated the request." Surprised by this small display of humor, Aiyana couldn't help but smile in return. "That's very efficient of you." "Efficiency keeps people alive." His voice had regained its usual seriousness. "And what keeps people happy, Nantan?" she asked impulsively. Surely life must be more than survival. He considered her question with unexpected thoughtfulness. "I wouldn't know," he finally said. "Perhaps you should find out," she suggested softly. Their conversation was interrupted by Aiyana's father calling for her. Makia had collapsed near the fire, his persistent cough suddenly worse. As a healer herself, Aiyana recognized the seriousness of his condition immediately. Throughout the night, she tended to him in their temporary shelter, applying poultices and brewing medicinal teas. By dawn, his fever had worsened, his breathing labored and painful. "I need skunkroot and mountain sage," she told her worried siblings. "They grow high on the eastern slopes." "I'll find them," came Nantan's voice from the doorway. He stood there, looking as though he hadn't slept, his expression concerned. "Tell me what they look like." As Aiyana described the plants in detail, she wondered when and why the tribe's most solitary warrior had appointed himself her family's protector. By midday, Nantan had returned with the medicinal plants, along with several others Aiyana hadn't requested but recognized as powerful healers. For 3 days, she barely left her father's side, applying remedies, monitoring his breathing, and praying to the ancestors for guidance. On the 3rd night, Makia's fever finally broke, and he fell into a deep, healing sleep. Exhausted but relieved, Aiyana stepped outside into the cool night air. The settlement was quiet, most people already retired to their shelters. A nearly full moon bathed the landscape in silver light. She needed to thank Nantan. His swift retrieval of the mountain herbs had made the difference in her father's recovery. After asking a night watchman, she learned that Nantan had taken the solitary evening patrol his preferred duty and was likely at the eastern ridge. The path to the ridge was familiar to Aiyana, though she rarely traveled it at night. As she climbed, the moonlight guided her steps. Near the top, she paused, hearing a strange haunting sound carried on the night breeze music, unlike any she had heard in the settlement. Following the sound, she discovered Nantan seated on a flat boulder, overlooking the valley. In his hands was a simple wooden flute, from which he drew melodies both melancholy and beautiful. So absorbed was he in the music that he didn't notice her approach until she was just a few paces away. He stopped abruptly, lowering the flute. "You shouldn't be out here alone. I came to thank you," she said, undeterred by his gruff greeting. "The plants you brought saved my father's life." He nodded once, slipping the flute into his belt as if to hide it. "Please," she said, gesturing to the instrument, "don't stop on my account. It was beautiful." Nantan seemed uncomfortable with the compliment. "It's just something I do sometimes, when no one is around." Who taught you?" He was silent for so long that Aiyana thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he said, "Kitsu, the war chief who raised me. He said warriors need beauty as well as strength." "He was wise," Aiyana said softly, settling on a nearby stone. "Would you play again, please?" After a moment's hesitation, Nantan retrieved the flute. The melody he played was different, this time gentler, less sorrowful. Under the vast starry sky, with the settlement sleeping peacefully below, Aiyana felt something rare and precious. In this shared moment, when he finished, she asked, "Did you make the flute yourself?" "Kitsu made it. It's one of the few things I have from him." "You must have loved him very much." Nantan's fingers traced the simple carvings on the wooden flute. "He was the father I lost, the brother I never had, the teacher who shaped me." His voice held a vulnerability Aiyana had never heard before. "When he died, I vowed to become the warrior he believed I could be, to never fail as I did that day." "What happened wasn't your fault," Aiyana said gently, intuiting the guilt that had driven him to isolation. "No warrior can control every outcome of battle. I should have been faster, stronger." His grip tightened on the flute. 5 warriors died because I didn't see the ambush soon enough. And how many lived because you fought after the ambush was sprung?" She challenged. "My father says you carried 3 wounded men to safety before returning to fight." Nantan looked at her with surprise. "How does he know that?" "He was there. Not fighting, he was tending the wounded." She moved closer, close enough that she could see the moonlight reflected in his dark eyes. "He says you saved many lives that day, including his own." For a long moment, they sat in silence, the weight of shared understanding between them. "Your father is recovering?" Nantan finally asked. "Yes. He sleeps peacefully now," Aiyana smiled. "He said to thank the silent warrior with the keen eyes for remembering what skunkroot looks like." The ghost of a smile touched Nantan's lips. "I pay attention, so you've said before." Aiyana rose to her feet. "The lodge is nearly complete. Tomorrow we'll begin setting the roof beams. Will you come?" The invitation hung in the air, between them simple words carrying deeper meaning. "I have patrol duties," he began, then stopped himself. "But I'll come when I can." As they walked back toward the settlement, side by side under the moon's silver gaze, Aiyana felt a shift in the air between them, as if invisible stones were being carefully placed, building something neither had planned, but both could now begin to see taking shape. 2 weeks passed, and the threat of raiders seemed to recede. Scouts reported no sign of Navajo war parties, and the settlement's rhythms slowly returned to normal. Aiyana's lodge now stood complete, its stone walls solid and enduring, with a well-crafted roof of timber and brush sealed with clay. The tribe had planned a blessing ceremony for the following day to mark its completion, and the family's official move inside. Nantan had kept his word, helping with the heavy roof beams when his duties allowed. Though still a man of few words, he had become a familiar presence around Aiyana's family. Young Tallulah had taken to following him, peppering him with questions that he answered with surprising patience. Even Kitchi, eager to prove himself among the warriors, had begun seeking Nantan's guidance with bow and spear dot. As for Aiyana, she found herself looking for him whenever she worked on final touches to the lodge. Their conversations remained brief, but had grown more comfortable. Sometimes he would work silently alongside her for hours, neither feeling the need to fill the silence with words. "He's different when you're near," Halaku had observed one evening. Less guarded. Aiyana had brushed off the comment, though it warmed her to think it might be true. On the eve of the blessing ceremony, the settlement hummed with preparations. Extra food had been gathered, hides prepared for new bedding, and Aiyana's family's few possessions organized for the move. Makya, fully recovered from his illness, performed preliminary prayers at the lodge's entrance. earning sacred herbs and calling to the ancestors. As twilight approached, scouts returned from the day's patrol. Their report to Chief Ahot seemed routine until Aiyana noticed the chief's expression darken. He summoned the war council immediately. "What's happening?" Aiyana asked Tarek as he hurried past. "Nothing to worry about," he assured her, though his face betrayed concern. "Probably just precautions." Unconvinced, Aiyana approached the council lodge after the meeting began, lingering near enough to hear fragments of discussion. The scouts had found no sign of raiders. That was the problem. The Navajo tracks they had been following for weeks had vanished completely, as if the war party had simply disappeared. "They've either retreated or changed their approach," she heard Heliku say. "Nantan, what do you think?" "They haven't retreated." Nantan's voice was certain. "They're testing our vigilance, waiting for us to lower our guard." The council continued, debating, but Aiyana had heard enough to understand the unease. She returned to her family's preparations, keeping her concerns to herself. Tonight was for celebration, not fear. As darkness fell, the tribe gathered for a feast honoring the new lodge. Drums beat, stories were told, and for a few hours, specter of danger receded. Aiyana danced with the other women, her heart light with accomplishment and belonging. Nantan watched from the shadows, as was his custom at celebrations. When their eyes met across the firelight, he inclined his head slightly, a gesture of respect and something more that made her breath catch. Late in the night, as the celebration wound down, Aiyana's brother Kichi proudly took his place among the night sentries for the first time, determined to prove his readiness to join the warriors despite his youth. Aiyana gave him a hug before he took his post on the western edge of the settlement. "Keep your eyes sharp and your spear sharper," she teased, adjusting his headband. "I won't let anyone past," he promised, chest puffed with importance. The family retired to their temporary shelter one final time, anticipating tomorrow's move to the stone lodge. Aiyana fell asleep quickly, exhausted from the day's activities and lulled by the familiar sounds of her father's soft snoring and Tallulah's even breathing. A blood-curdling war cry shattered the pre-dawn silence. Aiyana bolted upright, momentarily disoriented. More cries followed, along with the sounds of struggle and the distinctive thud of clubs against flesh. Her father was already moving, grabbing his medicine bag. "Raiders!" he hissed. "Stay inside." But Aiyana's first thought was of Kichi on sentry duty. She grabbed her knife and slipped out behind her father. The scene outside was chaos. Shadow figures moved through the darkness, attacking sleeping families. How had they breached the defenses so completely? Where were the sentries? Her answer came with horrifying clarity when something landed at her feet, a blood-stained arrow. Not just any arrow, but one marked with her brother's distinctive feathers. The attack was swift and brutal. The Navajo raiders had somehow slipped past the sentries in the darkness, using the celebration as cover for their approach. By the time the tribe rallied its defense, several lodges were already burning, and screams filled the night air. Aiyana's training as a healer took over. She dragged wounded tribespeople to safety, applying hasty bandages and directing the younger children to carry water. Her father worked beside her, his skilled hands moving with practiced efficiency despite the chaos. Through smoke and shadows, she caught glimpses of the fighting. Apache warriors formed defensive positions around the vulnerable center of the settlement. Among them, she recognized Tarak's powerful form, wielding a war club with deadly precision. But it was Nantan who commanded the eye in battle. He moved like a mountain spirit, his obsidian knife flashing in the firelight as he engaged 3 raiders at once. His face was a mask of focused fury as he drove them back from a group of cornered women and children. The stone lodge. Heliku's voice carried above the din. "Get the wounded to the stone lodge." Aiyana's heart leaped with grim satisfaction. Her creation would now serve its ultimate purpose: protection for her people. She helped direct the wounded and vulnerable toward the solid stone walls that stood untouched by the flames consuming the hide shelters. Aiyana! Tallulah's terrified voice cut through the chaos. Her young sister ran to her, eyes wild with fear. Father is hurt, and I can't find Kichi. Dread clutched at Aiyana's chest as she followed Tallulah to where Makia lay half-conscious, blood seeping from a gash on his temple. She quickly assessed the wound serious, but not immediately life-threatening. "Help me get him to the lodge," she instructed her sister. Together, they dragged their father toward safety. Once inside the stone walls, Aiyana found dozens of her tribespeople taking refuge. She organized the unhurt into action, some tending the wounded, others collecting weapons, water, and supplies. The thick stone walls muffled the sounds of continuing battle outside. What of Kichi? She asked everyone. Who entered? None had seen her brother Dot as dawn approached. The sounds of fighting diminished. The raiders, meeting stronger resistance than expected, began to withdraw. Cautiously, warriors ventured out to assess the damage and pursue stragglers. Tarak entered the lodge, blood streaming from a cut on his arm, but otherwise unharmed. "We've pushed them back," he reported. "They took what they could carry and fled north." "Casualties?" Elder Hanavi asked, her ancient face grave. "6 dead, many wounded," Tarak replied heavily. And ... double quotes. He hesitated, glancing at Aiyana. "And what?" she demanded, rising from beside her father's sleeping form. "They took captives, 4 of our people." Tarak's eyes couldn't meet hers. "Including Nantan." The world seemed to stop for Aiyana. "Nantan? How?" "He was cut off while defending the eastern side. They overwhelmed him." Tarak's voice held reluctant admiration. "It took 7 of them to subdue him. They seemed to specifically want him alive." "And Kichi?" Aiyana asked, dreading the answer. "Missing. He may have been taken as well." The lodge fell silent as the impact of the night's losses sank in. Raiders often took captives for ransom or slavery. Sometimes for worse purposes. As the wounded were tended and plans made to rebuild, Aiyana slipped outside. The morning sun illuminated the devastation-burned shelters, scattered possessions, blood-stained earth. Near the settlement's edge, she found what she sought, the place where Kichi had stood sentry. Signs of struggle were evident. Kneeling, she examined the ground with newfound attention to detail, skills she had absorbed watching Nantan track game and raiders. There, partially hidden in disturbed soil, she found a torn piece of Kichi's headband. Nearby lay a broken knife knot, Apache made, but Navajo. Using a stick, Aiyana traced a rough map in the dirt, marking the settlement, the direction of the raiders' retreat, the location of nearby landmarks. Her mind worked with unusual clarity, fueled by determination and fear for her brother and Nantan. Survival for captives depended on how quickly they could be recovered. The tribe's remaining warriors were wounded, disorganized, and needed to protect the settlement against possible return attacks. A formal rescue party might take days to organize. Kichi and Nantan might not have days. Gathering the broken Navajo knife and the piece of headband, Aiyana returned to the lodge. As she helped tend the wounded, a plan formed in her mind, one that she knew the tribal council would forbid if they learned of it. She would need supplies, weapons, and most of all, courage. By nightfall, when the exhausted tribe slept, she would be gone following the raiders' trail alone if necessary. As dusk approached, Aiyana gathered supplies with methodical precision-dried meat, a water skin, her small healer's knife, and a leather pouch of medicinal herbs. She dressed in dark clothing for stealth, binding her hair tightly and smearing ash on her face to shadow her features. Her father's sacred tobacco pouch, used for prayer and seeking spiritual guidance, she tucked close to her heart. Going somewhere? Aiyana whirled to find Tarak watching from the lodge entrance. His arm was now properly bandaged, his face cleaned of battle grime. I need fresh medicine plants, she lied. Many were destroyed in the fire. With travel provisions? A knife? At dusk? Tarak's eyes narrowed. You're going after them. She straightened, abandoning pretense. My brother and our people need me. It's suicide, he said flatly. The raiders are many, all warriors. You are one woman, a healer, not a fighter. I don't plan to fight them openly, she replied. I've watched Nantan track game and raiders. For weeks, I know what to look for. Knowing tracks and being a tracker are different things, Tarak argued. You'll be captured or killed, and what good will that do Kichi or the others? Aiyana turned away, continuing her preparations. I won't abandon them. Nor will I abandon you, Tarak said with sudden resolve. If you insist on this foolishness, I'm coming with you. She studied his face, searching for deception. The tribe needs warriors here for protection. The tribe needs its healer too, he countered. But I see your mind is set. Two have better chances than one. Reluctantly, Aiyana nodded. We leave when the fires die down. As they waited for full darkness, word of their plan somehow reached others. Two young warriors, cousins named Ahanu and Dayami, approached with determined expressions. We're coming too, Ahanu announced, already carrying his bow and quiver. Kichi is our age brother. We trained together. Aiyana began to protest, but Tarak raised a hand. 4 is better than 2, he said quietly. They're both skilled with the bow. We'll follow you anyway if you refuse, Dayami added with youthful stubbornness. Fine, Aiyana conceded. But we move silently and follow my lead. With the settlement finally quiet, the small rescue party slipped away under cover of darkness. Aiyana led them to where she had found signs of her brother's struggle, then began methodically searching for the raiders' trail. For 2 days, they tracked the war party northward, moving through the landscape with cautious determination. Aiyana surprised her companions with her growing skill at reading signs, broken twigs, disturbed stones, occasional footprints in soft earth. Nantan's lessons, absorbed through observation, now guided her steps. On the 3rd morning, they discovered the remains of a hasty camp, still warm ashes and discarded bones indicating the raiders had stopped only hours before. They're slowed by their captives and stolen goods, Tarak observed. We're gaining on them. How many? Aiyana asked, surveying the campsite. Tarak circled the area slowly. From the footprints and sleeping places. One count at least 15. Maybe more. And we are 4, Dayami said nervously. We need a plan beyond simply catching them, Aiyana acknowledged. She knelt beside the ashes, drawing out her father's sacred tobacco pouch. I need guidance. While the warriors kept watch, Aiyana performed a brief prayer ritual, sprinkling tobacco as an offering and closing her eyes in meditation. She had witnessed her father seek spiritual guidance this way countless times, but had never led such a ritual herself. As the fragrant smoke rose from the smoldering tobacco, Aiyana's mind grew unusually still. Images formed behind her closed eyelids. A river crossing, an eagle circling, a cave entrance half hidden by brush. Most clearly, she saw night-blooming flowers with distinctive white petals. When she opened her eyes, she felt a certainty that surprised even her. They'll camp near the 3 rivers crossing, she said, rising to her feet. There's a cave they'll use for shelter. Tarak looked skeptical. How can you know that? The vision showed me, she replied simply. And it showed me how we might succeed where force would fail. From her medicine pouch, she produced a small bundle of dried leaves. This plant induces deep sleep when brewed into tea or mixed with food. Not deadly, but enough to render warriors helpless for hours. The others exchanged dubious glances. "You want to poison a war party of 15 Navajo raiders?" Ahanu asked incredulously. "I want to rescue our people without needless bloodshed," Aiyana corrected. "The vision showed me white flowers that bloom at night. They grow near water. If we reach 3 rivers crossing before them, I can gather more. With enough, we might succeed." Tarek studied her face for a long moment. "And if this plan fails?" Aiyana touched the knife at her belt. "Then we fight and die as Apache." Aiyana's vision proved true. By pushing themselves to the limit, the small rescue party reached the 3 rivers crossing by nightfall. True to her vision, delicate white flowers bloomed along the riverbank, their petals luminous in the gathering darkness. She harvested them carefully, explaining their potency to her companions. "The raiders will arrive tomorrow," she predicted, crushing the flowers and leaves into a potent mixture. "They'll rest here before crossing the river." They scouted the area and found the cave half hidden by brush, exactly as Aiyana had seen in her vision. Nearby, they discovered an ideal observation point among a cluster of boulders. From there, they could watch the raiders' camp without being seen. "I still don't understand how we'll get close enough to use your sleeping medicine," Ahanu worried, checking his bowstring for the 10th time. "Leave that to me," Aiyana replied, though uncertainty gnawed at her confidence. At midday, dust on the horizon announced the raiders' approach. The rescue party retreated to their hiding place, watching as 15 Navajo warriors entered the clearing, driving 4 bound captives before them. Aiyana's heart clenched at the sight of Kichi, limping but alive. Behind him walked a woman and her young son from the settlement. Last came Nantan, his face bruised and bloodied, hands bound before him with rawhide strips. Despite his injuries, he carried himself with unbowed dignity, his eyes constantly scanning his surroundings. The raiders kept him separate from the others, 4 warriors always nearby, a testament to how dangerous they considered him even in captivity. "They fear him," Tarek whispered, noting the same details. "They should." The raiders made camp efficiently, setting guards and preparing food. The captives were secured to a large boulder near the cave entrance, given water but no food. Aiyana observed every detail, her mind racing through possibilities. As dusk approached, she made her decision. "I'll go in alone," she whispered. "After dark?" "Impossible," Tarek hissed. "They'll kill you on sight, not if they don't see me as a threat." She unwrapped a small bundle, revealing a tattered Navajo blanket she had collected from the raid site. "I'll approach as a medicine woman coming to trade herbs. Many tribes respect healers, even enemy ones." Her companions protested, but Aiyana remained firm. "If I fail, you 3 can still attempt a rescue, but if you're discovered first, we lose all chance." Reluctantly, they agreed to wait for her signal and owl's call if she succeeded. 3 rapid whistles if she needed immediate help. As darkness fell and the raiders gathered around their cook fires, Aiyana slipped away. She wrapped herself in the Navajo blanket, rubbed dirt on her face, and loosened her hair to change her appearance. Most importantly, she carried a basket of trading herbs, prominently displayed, the sleeping medicine disguised among harmless plants. Her heart pounded as she approached the edge of the camp, deliberately making enough noise to be noticed rather than shot as a sneak. 2 guards spotted her, immediately leveling their weapons. "I bring medicine," she called out in the trade language used between tribes. "For trade." The guards exchanged suspicious glances, but didn't immediately attack. One called to the others, and soon the raid leader approached, a tall, scarred warrior with calculating eyes. "Apache woman brings medicine to Navajo?" he asked, skeptically in broken Apache. "Why?" "I follow the healer's path," Aiyana replied steadily. "All tribes need medicine." I have fever bark, pain roots. She gestured to her basket. Trade for food blankets. The leader studied her carefully and barked orders to his men. 2 warriors searched her roughly, but found nothing beyond the herbs in her basket. Apparently deciding a lone woman posed little threat, the leader gestured for her to sit near the fire. Show medicines, he commanded. Aiyana knelt and began displaying her herbs, explaining their uses with calm authority, drawn from years of training under her father. She kept the sleeping medicine concealed beneath other plants, waiting for this right moment. Across the fire, Nantan had recognized her instantly despite her disguise. His face revealed nothing, but his eyes burned with a mixture of admiration and fear for her safety. He shifted slightly, testing his bonds, drawing the attention of his guards. The distraction was exactly what Aiyana needed. As all eyes turned toward Nantan, she slipped the sleeping medicine into the communal cooking pot bubbling over the fire. Your captive needs medicine, she said, pointing to Nantan's obvious injuries. I can treat him. Make him stronger for your journey. The leader laughed harshly. This one? No medicine. He killed 3 of my warriors. He watches only. As you wish. Aiyana bowed her head submissively while her mind raced. The medicine would take time to work. She needed to remain in the camp until then without arousing suspicion. Share food, the leader suddenly ordered, gesturing to the pot. Then trade. Aiyana's heart froze. They expected her to eat the drugged. Food first. With steady hands that betrayed none of her inner turmoil, Aiyana accepted the bowl of drugged stew. She had prepared for many contingencies, but not this one. The sleeping herbs wouldn't kill her, but if she succumbed to their effects, the rescue would fail before it began. First, I pray, she said, bowing her head over the bowl. Keeping her movements deliberate and ritualistic, she let a small antidote powder fall from her sleeve into the stew, a counteragent she carried for accidental poisonings. It wouldn't neutralize the herbs completely, but might blunt their effect. Enough to keep her conscious. She ate slowly, taking small bites while talking about the healing properties of various plants. All the while, she watched as the raiders consumed their meals eagerly, passing the cooking pot around for seconds. Across the fire, Nantan refused to take his eyes off her. His gaze communicated volumes concern, admiration, and growing understanding of her plan. When a guard roughly offered him food, he accepted without hesitation, clearly intending to maintain his strength for whatever came next as the meal progressed. Aiyana felt a heaviness creeping into her limbs, the sleeping herbs, affecting her despite the antidote. She fought to keep her eyes clear and her speech coherent, relying on her healer's training to recognize and resist the symptoms. Good medicine, woman, the raid leader said, his speech already slurring slightly. What tribe? I travel between tribes, she answered vaguely. My mother was Pueblo. This lie seemed to satisfy him. Around the fire, warriors were becoming noticeably drowsy. Some had already stretched out on their blankets, eyes heavy-lidded. Others fought the sensation, looking confused at their sudden exhaustion. The raid leader himself struggled to his feet, suddenly suspicious. What you do? He demanded, reaching for his knife with fumbling fingers. The night is warm, the journey long, Aiyana replied soothingly. Rest is good medicine. 2. Before he could respond, his knees buckled and he collapsed heavily to the ground. Within moments, only scattered guards at the perimeter, who hadn't eaten from the communal pot, remained alert. Fighting her own growing drowsiness, Aiyana made the owl call to signal her companions. Then she crawled to where Nantan and the other captives were bound. Clever healer, Nantan whispered as she worked at his bindings with her small knife. But dangerous. Less talking, more escaping, she murmured, sawing through the rawhide strips. The knife was painfully slow against the tough material. Suddenly, A shout rang out. One of the perimeter guards had spotted her. Before she could react, an arrow whistled through the darkness, striking the boulder inches from her head. More shouts followed as the remaining alert warriors raised the alarm. The rawhide around Nantan's wrists finally gave way. He immediately seized the knife from Aiyana's hand and turned to free Kichi. "Go," he ordered her. "Run." Instead, she grabbed a fallen warrior's weapon, a stone war club, and positioned herself protectively in front of the still-bound captives. Her vision swam from the effects of the herbs, but her grip remained firm. A guard charged toward them, spear raised. Summoning strength she didn't know she possessed, Aiyana swung the club, catching him in the midsection. He doubled over, gasping, as Tarak and the two young warriors burst into the camp, arrows flying. Chaos erupted. The few conscious raiders found themselves under attack from multiple directions, while their companions lay helpless in drug-induced sleep. Nantan, now free, became a whirlwind of controlled violence, disarming one warrior after another with precise economic movements. "The others are coming," Tarak shouted, engaging a particularly large raider in close combat. "More warriors from our tribe." Aiyana blinked in confusion, then understood a bluff to demoralize the remaining raiders. She played along. "They bring many bows." The ruse worked. Seeing most of their companions incapacitated and believing reinforcements approached, the remaining raiders fled into the darkness dot, with the immediate threat gone. They quickly freed the remaining captives. Kichi embraced his sister fiercely, despite his injuries. "I knew you would come," he whispered. Somehow, I knew. Their victory was short-lived. From the direction the raiders had fled came angry voices. They had regrouped and were returning, likely with reinforcements from their main camp. "We need to move," Nantan said grimly, gathering weapons from the sleeping warriors. Now, Aiyana handed her water gourd to the exhausted captives. It was their only water, barely enough to share among them. The nearest safe water source was a day's journey away. "They'll track us easily," Tarak warned, looking at their clearly visible trail and the slow-moving freed captives. "Not if they're following the wrong trail," Nantan replied, his mind already forming a plan. "Aiyana, can you travel?" She nodded, though the sleeping herbs still pulled at her consciousness. "I'll manage." His eyes held hers for a moment. "You've done what even seasoned warriors couldn't. Now we need one more miracle." Nantan's plan was as simple as it was desperate. The group would split Tarak, and the two young warriors would lead the woman, child, and injured Kichi along the river where rocky shores would minimize tracks, while Nantan and Aiyana would create a false trail leading into the higher canyon country to draw pursuit. "Once we've led them far enough away, we'll double back and rejoin you," Nantan explained, gathering supplies. "It's too dangerous," Tarak objected. "Let me go with you instead of Aiyana." "She's still affected by her own medicine," Nantan countered. "She'll slow your group down, and I need someone strong leading the others." He clasped Tarak's shoulder. "You're that warrior." The unaccustomed praise from Nantan silenced Tarak's protests. After brief goodbyes, the group separated Tarak, leading the larger party downstream, while Nantan and Aiyana headed deliberately toward the rocky highlands, leaving clear tracks for the first mile, before becoming more careful dot as dawn broke. They paused on a high ridge to rest and observe. In the distance, they could see dust rising, the raiders following their false trail exactly as hoped. "It worked," Aiyana whispered, her voice hoarse with exhaustion. The effects of the sleeping herbs had mostly faded, leaving her drained but clear-headed. "For now," Nantan replied. His face was a mask of controlled focus, but blood had seeped through his shirt where old wounds had reopened during their flight. "Let me see," she insisted, gesturing to his injuries. "Later, we need to keep moving." But Aiyana stood her ground. You're bleeding. 5 minutes now means you won't collapse later. Reluctantly, Nantan allowed her to examine the worst wound, a deep gash across his ribs. Using herbs from her medicine pouch and strips torn from her own clothing, Aiyana cleaned and bound the injury. As she worked, her fingers traced older, scars that mapped his history of battles. "Why did you come for us?" he asked suddenly. "You could have been killed." "The same reason you fought to protect our settlement," she answered, securing the bandage. "Some things matter more than safety." Their eyes met, a moment of perfect understanding passing between them. "We should go," he said softly. They traveled through the day, creating false trails, doubling back, and using every trick Nantan knew to confuse their pursuers. By late afternoon, they had circled around toward the river, hoping to rejoin Tarak's group by nightfall. Instead, they found disaster. From a concealed position among river boulders, they watched as Tarak and the others, surrounded by raiders, were being marched back toward Navajo territory. From fragments of conversation carried on the wind, they learned that a second raiding party had intercepted the fleeing captives. "We have to help them," Aiyana whispered desperately. "We're 2 against at least a dozen," Nantan replied, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. "We'd die without helping anyone. Then what?" "Abandon." "Them?" The anguish in his eyes matched her own. "No, never." He studied the terrain ahead, mind working. "There's a narrow pass 2 miles ahead. If they follow the river, they'll have to go through it. We might create an opportunity there." As dusk approached, they reached the pass, a tight corridor of stone where the river had carved through ancient rock. Positions of natural concealment abounded, but so did echoes that might betray them. "I need war paint," Nantan said unexpectedly. "What?" "The Navajo fear Apache war spirits. With proper markings, in the shadows." He didn't finish the thought. Understanding dawned on Aiyana. From her medicine pouch, she produced red ochre and black charcoal used for healing rituals, but equally effective for more martial purposes. With practiced hands, she applied the traditional patterns to Nantan's face and bare chest symbols of protection and power passed down through generations. As she worked, she chanted softly healing, prayers remixed as warrior blessings. The intimacy of the moment, the sacred connection of paint to skin, created a bond between them that transcended words. When she finished, Nantan looked transformed, less a man than a manifestation of Apache warrior spirit. He took her hands. In his, ochre and charcoal mingling on their skin. "If we die tonight," he said quietly, "I die with no regrets except one, that I wasted too many years hiding from what I feel now." "And what is that?" she asked, her voice barely audible above the rushing river. "That some vows are meant to be broken," he replied, "and some lodges are built stone by stone, like what has grown between us." The distant sound of voices announced the approaching raiders with their captives. There was no more time for words. Nantan pressed his forehead briefly against hers, an Apache gesture of deepest connection, then melted into the shadows to take his position. Aiyana moved to her own hiding place, notching an arrow in the bow Nantan had given her. Whatever happened next, they would face it together, the healer and the warrior, 2 halves now whole. The raiders entered the narrow pass just as darkness fell completely, torches casting long, writhing shadows against the stone walls. They drove their captives before them, Tarak, limping but defiant, Kitchi supporting the exhausted woman, and the small boy stumbling with fatigue. Aiyana waited, heart pounding, for Nantan's signal. Their plan was simple yet desperate: create confusion, free the captives, and use the narrow confines of the pass to neutralize the raiders' advantage in numbers. The eerie, spine-chilling cry of an Apache war spirit Nantan's signal echoed through the canyon. Before the raiders could react, Aiyana loosed her first arrow, striking a torchbearer. The torch fell, flames hissing out in the shallow water at the pass's edge. Darkness claimed that section of the pass immediately. From the shadows came Nantan's voice, calling out in Navajo, deliberately distorted to sound otherworldly. "You have taken what belongs to the Apache. The spirits demand blood payment." Confusion rippled through the raiders. Another torch went out as Aiyana's second arrow found its mark. Now only 2 lights remained, creating more disorienting shadows than illumination. Nantan, his painted form appearing and disappearing between patches of darkness, seemed to be everywhere at once. He struck quickly, not killing blows, but painful, disorienting ones before vanishing again into the shadows. "Demon!" one raider cried out in terror. "Apache witch spirit!" The captives, recognizing the rescue attempt, acted with coordinated precision. Tarek threw himself against the nearest guard. Kichi pulled the woman and child toward the canyon wall. Chaos erupted in the confined space. Aiyana's arrows continued to create strategic darkness until her quiver was empty. Then she drew her knife and slipped into the fray, keeping to the shadows as she worked her way toward the captives. One raider, more perceptive than the others, spotted her movement. "There, another one!" he shouted, lunging with his spear. The weapon caught Aiyana's side, opening a shallow but painful wound. She gasped, stumbling against the canyon wall. The raider raised his spear for a killing thrust, only to be met by Nantan, materializing like a spirit from the darkness. The obsidian knife flashed once. The raider fell without a sound. To the river bend. Nantan shouted to the freed captives, abandoning the pretense of spirit voices. "Run!" Tarek had armed himself with a fallen raider's club, and now fought beside Nantan, creating a defensive position, while Kichi helped the woman and child escape. Aiyana, pressing a hand to her bleeding side, joined them. "You're hurt," Nantan observed, his eyes never leaving the approaching raiders. "I'll live," she replied, brandishing her knife. "If we all do." The 3 of them backed slowly toward the canyon exit, maintaining a defensive line. But the raiders, recovering from their initial superstitious fear, pressed forward with greater numbers. "We won't all make it," Tarek said grimly. "We will." Nantan's voice held absolute certainty. "Listen." In the distance came a sound that froze. Both Apache and Navajo in place war cries, dozens of them, approaching rapidly. A moment later, arrows rained down from the canyon rim, striking with deadly accuracy among the raiders. The tribe, Aiyana breathed in disbelief. They came. Heliku appeared at the canyon entrance, leading a war party of 20 Apache warriors. The tide turned instantly. Outflanked and under attack from above, the raiders broke, fleeing back the way they had come. "Don't let them regroup," Heliku ordered. "Drive them back to their own territory." As the Apache warriors surged forward in pursuit, Nantan and Aiyana sagged against each other in exhaustion and relief. Tarek limped toward Heliku to report, while Kichi returned to embrace his sister. "How?" Aiyana asked, looking at the tribal warriors now securing the pass. "How did they find us?" "When you didn't return, I knew something was wrong," came her father's voice. Makya emerged from behind the warriors, medicine bag in hand. "The young ones confessed your plan. We gathered every warrior who could hold a weapon." "You led them here?" Nantan asked, impressed despite his exhaustion. The old healer shook his head. "I followed the signs of the spirits, as my daughter did." His weathered face creased with pride. As he examined Aiyana's wound, "The bleeding is already slowing. You'll carry another scar, but it will heal clean." As her father applied medicine to her injury, Aiyana's eyes found Nantan's. The war paint was now streaked with sweat and blood, but the man beneath was more visible than ever, his isolation broken, his connection to the tribe and to her undeniable. When the wounded had been treated and the pass secured, Heliku approached. "Them. The spirits favored us today," he said, looking meaningfully between Nantan and Aiyana. They brought together what belongs together. That night, as they camped on their journey home, Nantan sat beside Aiyana near the fire. From a small pouch, he withdrew two small object stone carvings, no bigger than a thumb, one an eagle, one a wolf. "I made these," he said quietly, offering the eagle to her. "During the nights I couldn't sleep. The eagle for you, who sees far and flies without fear. The wolf for me, too long alone." Aiyana accepted the tiny carving, feeling its smooth weight. In her palm, "They belong together," she said softly. "Like us." The homecoming to the Apache settlement was marked by both celebration and solemn remembrance for those lost in the raid. Families reunited, wounds were tended, and the community began the process of rebuilding what had been destroyed. Through it all, Aiyana's stone lodge stood as a symbol of endurance, one of the few structures completely untouched by the violence in the days that followed. Aiyana divided her time between healing the injured and completing the final details of her lodge. The stone walls that had sheltered many during the attack now welcomed her family home permanently. Her father's medicines found their proper places in the carefully designed niches. Tallulah's sleeping blankets brightened one corner. Kichi's weapons and tools hung proudly near the entrance. Nantan, to the surprise of many in the tribe, had begun spending less time in his isolated dwelling and more time in the settlement. He took his meals with others, participated in council meetings, and even agreed to train some of the younger warriors. The change in him was subtle, but unmistakable. A tension long held in his shoulders had eased. A shadow lifted from his eyes. On the evening before the lodge's formal blessing ceremony, Nantan approached Maka's fire as the family finished there. "Meal, I would speak with you," he said to the old healer, his formal tone betraying his nervousness. "About Aiyana." Makia nodded, unsurprised. "Walk with me." The two men moved away from the lodge, their conversation private, but their body language visible to Aiyana as she watched from the doorway. Her father listened intently, asked a few questions, and finally clasped Nantan's arm in the traditional gesture of agreement between men. When they returned, Makia's face held a serene contentment, while Nantan's usually impassive features showed something rarely seen hope. "Your father is a wise man," Nantan told her quietly, as Makia rejoined Tallulah and Kichi inside the lodge. "He says the path of healing and the path of protection can walk side by side, strengthening each other." Aiyana understood the metaphor's significance. "And what do you say?" "I say that I have lived too long in shadows of my own making." His voice remained low, meant for her ears alone. "I made a vow of solitude, believing it would make me stronger. Instead, it nearly broke me." He took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her palm. "You showed me that true strength comes from connection, not isolation." "The stones of a lodge are stronger together than apart," she replied, echoing the teaching she had followed. In her building the blessing ceremony the next day brought the entire tribe together. Elder Hanavi led the prayers, burning sacred herbs at each of the four corners, while Makia called upon the ancestors to protect all who sheltered within the walls. When the formal rituals concluded, a feast began that lasted well into the evening as darkness fell and the celebration continued. Nantan and Aiyana found a moment alone near the lodge's eastern wall. Above them, stars filled the clear desert sky. From the nearby fires came the sounds of drums and laughter. "I have something to ask you," Nantan said, his usual confidence tempered with uncharacteristic uncertainty. "If you would consider it." Aiyana waited, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "In the Apache way, a man who wishes to court a woman must first prove himself worthy to her family," he continued. "Your father has given his blessing, but I would hear your answer." He paused, gathering his words carefully. "Would you accept my intention to court you properly? To see if what has grown between us might become something lasting? Instead of answering immediately, Aiyana took his hand and led him to the lodge's entrance. There, embedded in the stone beside the doorway, were two small niches she had created. That morning, in one rested the wolf carving he had given her. "The second niche awaits its eagle," she said softly, "just as this lodge awaits its protector." Understanding dawned in his eyes. From his pouch, he withdrew the eagle carving and placed it carefully in the empty niche. The two stone figures now guarded the entrance together, wolf and eagle, warrior and healer. "I accept," Aiyana said, her voice clear and certain. "Not just your courtship, but all that you are, the solitary warrior and the man who plays beautiful music on a wooden flute beneath the stars. The protector of our people, and the man who gathered healing plants for my father." Nantan traced, his fingers over the carvings, then over the stones of the lodge wall, each one placed by Aiyana's hands, each one part of something greater than itself. "You built more than a lodge," he said. "You built a way back to life for me." Near the doorway, a small plant had taken root beside the foundation stones, a seedling reaching toward the sky, its future growth a promise waiting to be fulfilled. One full cycle of seasons had passed since the raid. Summer heat again shimmered above the mesas as the Apache settlement went about its daily rhythms. The scars of the attack had healed, though not without leaving their marks. New defensive walls surrounded the outer perimeter. Sentries were more vigilant, and warriors trained with greater purpose. Aiyana's stone lodge had become a centerpiece of the settlement. Its sturdy walls had inspired others to incorporate stone elements into their dwellings, creating a community more resistant to both natural disasters and human threats. As the tribe's healer in training, she had continued her father's work, expanding the medicine stores and teaching younger children the healing ways. Inside the lodge on this particular morning, Aiyana moved with the careful grace of a woman in her 7th month of pregnancy. Her rounded belly preceded her as she arranged dried herbs in careful bundles, her movements deliberate but efficient. "You should rest," Nantan suggested, entering with an armload of firewood. The past year had softened his warrior's demeanor, without diminishing his strength. Marriage had suited him in ways no one, perhaps, not even he, had expected. "I've rested enough," she replied with a smile. "The baby sleeps now, which means I can work." Nantan placed the wood by the central hearth, then moved to stand behind her, his hands resting gently on her shoulders. "Stubborn as the stones of this lodge," he murmured, the words a compliment rather than criticism. "As are you," she returned, leaning back against his chest. "Isn't that why we suit each other so well?" The traditional Apache courtship had progressed swiftly, surprising no one. By the harvest moon, they had exchanged the marriage vows, with Elder Hanavi blessing their union and the entire tribe celebrating for 3 days. Nantan had moved into the stone lodge, bringing with him few possessions, but an abundance of love and protection. When winter came, they had expanded the lodge, adding a new room for the child they already knew was growing. Nantan had shown unexpected talent for stonework, his warrior's hands capable of remarkable delicacy when fitting the smaller stones into place. Outside, the settlement had prospered. Strategic alliances with neighboring tribes, facilitated in part by Tarek's diplomatic skills, had created a network of mutual support and warning systems against raiders. Peace had held for many moons. "Kichi returns today with the hunting party," Aiyana said, finishing her herb arrangements. "Tallulah has been watching the trail since dawn." Nantan smiled at the mention of his young brother-in-law, now a respected hunter despite his youth. "He has grown strong this past year." "We all have," Aiyana replied, placing a hand on her belly as the baby stirred again, "in different ways." Later, that afternoon, as the day's heat began to wane, they sat together outside the lodge. Nantan worked on a small cradle of bent wood and sinew, while Aiyana wove a soft blanket for their coming child. Nearby, Tallulah played with the settlement's younger children, her laughter carrying on the warm breeze. Makia emerged from his healing lodge, where he had been teaching apprentices. Though he had gradually passed many of his duties to Aiyana, his wisdom remained vital to the tribe. He joined them, easing his aging bones onto a sitting mat with a contented sigh. "I had a dream last night," the old healer announced, his weathered face serene. "I saw a child, your child, standing on the mesa. Around this child, many lodges of stone had risen. Our people were numerous and strong." Aiyana and Nantan exchanged glances, honoring the vision with respectful silence. The spirits whispered that this child would carry both the healing wisdom and the warrior's heart, Makia continued. "A bridge between worlds, just as your union has been. Boy or girl?" Aiyana asked, curious despite her training that taught. All children contained both masculine and feminine energies. Makia's eyes twinkled. That the spirits chose not to reveal. Some surprises are meant to be discovered in their own time. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the stone walls of their lodge with golden light, Nantan placed his hand over Aiyana's on her rounded belly. The baby kicked against their joined hands, a strong, decisive movement. That made them both smile. "Our child already knows how to make his presence felt," Nantan observed. "Or her presence," Aiyana corrected with a raised eyebrow. "Whoever this little one becomes," Nantan said softly, "they begin life surrounded by strength, the strength of these stone walls, the strength of our tribe, the strength of our love." Aiyana leaned against him, content in the home she had built and the life they had created together. Stone by stone, day by day, they had constructed something that would endure, a foundation for generations, yet to come dot in the soft earth beside their lodge. The small seedling that had taken root a year before had grown into a young juniper tree, its branches reaching skyward with the same determination that had guided Aiyana's hands as she placed each stone of her lodge and each stone of their shared future. Production annotees the screenplay. She was building her lodge one stone at a time represents a commitment to authentic portrayal of Apache culture and traditions. Throughout the development and production process, several key considerations guided our approach. Historical accuracy. The narrative is set in the late 1800s, a pivotal time for Apache peoples facing pressures from territorial expansion and changing ways of life. Extensive research was conducted to ensure accurate representation of traditional dwelling construction techniques, medicinal plant knowledge and healing practices, tribal governance and social structures, spiritual beliefs and ceremonial practices, intertribal relations and conflict patterns. Apache cultural consultants from the White Mountain, Jicarilla, and Mescalero Apache nations provided guidance throughout the writing process. Their expertise was instrumental in developing nuanced characters who embody the values and worldviews of the period, while avoiding stereotypical portrayals. Production design elements. Physical environment serves as more than backdrop. It is integral to the story's themes and character development. Special attention was given to authentic recreation of traditional Apache settlements, accurate representation of terrain, flora, and fauna specific to Apache territories, period-appropriate tools, weapons, clothing, and personal items. Symbolic artifacts that carry cultural significance without appropriation. Scouting focused on identifying filming sites that would respect the sacred nature of actual historical Apache territories while providing the visual landscape necessary for the narrative. Language and dialogue considerations. While the screenplay is written in English for accessibility, the production incorporated Apache language consultants to ensure proper pronunciation of names and terms, dialogue patterns that reflect traditional Apache, communication styles, minimal use of English idioms that would be anachronistic to the period, thoughtful integration of Apache concepts that have no direct English translation, broader themes, beyond the love story at its center, The screenplay explores universal themes through an Apache cultural lens. Balance between individual journey and community responsibility. Healing from personal and collective trauma. The integration of seemingly opposing life paths. Warrior, healer. Building foundations that withstand both natural and human-made challenges. Throughout the production process, our commitment remains steadfast to portraying Apache people not as historical relics, but as fully realized human beings navigating complex emotional and social landscapes within their cultural context. The production team acknowledges with gratitude the guidance of our Apache consultants, whose names appear prominently in the film's credits. Their generosity in sharing cultural knowledge made possible a narrative that honors rather than appropriates Apache heritage. Director's statement. In bringing this story to the screen, we sought to create a mature, thoughtful portrayal that speaks to audiences across cultural backgrounds while maintaining absolute respect for Apache traditions. We believe that authentic representation matters, not just in the obvious elements of costume and setting, but in the deeper aspects of character motivation, worldview, and values. Our hope is that viewers will connect with Aiyana and Nantan's journey on a human level while gaining appreciation for the richness and wisdom of Apache culture. Like the stone lodge at the center of our story, we aim to build something that will endure, a narrative that stands firmly on the foundation of respect, research, and cultural collaboration. Viewing context, this screenplay was specifically crafted for viewers who appreciate deliberate pacing, nuanced character development, and thematic depth. While accessible to general audiences, it particularly resonates with mature viewers who bring their own life experiences to their understanding of the characters' journeys. The narrative structure honors traditional storytelling approaches while incorporating contemporary cinematic techniques to create an immersive experience that bridges cultural and historical distances with universal human emotions.